Thank you, dear Teresa. And good morning, everybody. Welcome today to the honoring and celebration of the 10th anniversary of the Civil Society and Indigenous Peoples Mechanism. It is an honor today to be a co-moderator with Trudy and Nettie, powerful sisters. I want to take a moment to, as we welcome you into our event today, to really reflect on why the CSM was created. Right? It was created out of the reform of the Committee on Food Security. When we were tackling challenging times in our global food system. And right now we're also tackling important and challenging times in our food system. And so today we will be hearing from the chair of the Committee on Food Security, and thank you for being with us today. We will be hearing from different veterans of the CSM. We will also be hearing from the actions that we are proposing as we go forward. So we have to link the history of the Civil Society Indigenous Peoples Mechanism and really think of where we are right now. With that, I will pass it to my brother, Saul Vicente, who will be opening this circle, this virtual circle that we're in right now. And he will be opening it up with a welcome from Indigenous peoples on this day of Indigenous Peoples Day. I pass the word to you, Saul.
Iskiseli, Bizana, Nicole. Padiusi, Bicheca, Bizanaca. Muchas gracias, hermana Nicole. Saludos a todas y todos. Hermanas y hermanos, 12 de octubre es la fecha en que se reconoce la lucha de resistencia de los pueblos indígenas de Abya Yala, América, por su dignidad, por la defensa de sus culturas y sus territorios, iniciada en el año 1492, el año de la invasión a nuestros territorios ancestrales. Ante la situación de crisis económica, sanitaria, alimentaria y civilizatoria que vivimos, debemos retomar ese espíritu de resistencia para continuar transformando los estándares de derechos humanos y exigir el cumplimiento de nuestros derechos reconocidos. Debemos continuar utilizando nuestra espiritualidad y nuestras identidades para este propósito. Por esa razón, en este día, en que también se cumplen 10 años de la existencia del mecanismo de la sociedad civil y pueblos indígenas, la plataforma más incluyente de los movimientos de productoras y productores de alimentos de pequeña escala, queremos iniciar con nuestra ceremonia indígena, para que esta espiritualidad fortalezca la lucha de nuestras hermanas y hermanos por el derecho a la alimentación y la soberanía alimentaria. Se trata de la ceremonia del pueblo otomí de agradecimiento a la Madre Tierra, de la comunidad de Tierra Blanca, Guanajuato, México. Adelante, por favor.
Gracias por todo el beneficio que nos da el pan de cada día que nos han dado en todos estos días, estos años que hemos vivido. Gracias, Señor, porque vivimos tantos años y aquí estamos. Te damos gracias porque todos mis familias, mis hijos están. Te doy gracias, Señor, y que nos sigas dando el pan de cada día, que nunca nos falte, de tus bendiciones y de tus benditas manos. Gracias, Señor. Gracias. Papá Dios, te doy gracias por estas tierras, esto que nos has dado, nos has dado estas bendiciones. Yo por eso te doy muchas gracias, Padre Santo, y que no nos desampares nunca en todos los días de nuestra vida. Así sea, amén.
Amén.
Dios es Padre, Madre, nos ama mucho. Dios es Padre, Madre, nos hace comer. La luz de la
Thank you, dear Saúl. Gracias, querido Saúl y Guasarana. Now we will be hearing from our sister, Ali Shatu, who will be sharing some words with us.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. I will say the CFS chair or protocol duly respected. Good afternoon. I am proud and most delighted to present a short message about Indigenous people on behalf of all my Indigenous brothers and sisters all over the world on this special twin celebration, celebrating the 12th anniversary of Indigenous people resistance in Latin America and the 10th anniversary of the civil society mechanism and Indigenous people mechanism for relation with the UN Committee for Food Security and Nutrition. All over the world, Indigenous people have been rising and resisting for centuries to protect their culture, their land, and livelihood. That is a vital piece of our legacy. Maintaining the covenant between humans and the natural world is essential to our survival. And it begins with protecting and affirming the collective and individual rights of the indigenous people. The indigenous people are approximately 476 million worldwide in over 90 countries. We safeguard 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. In Africa, indigenous people face a lot of challenges, ranging from marginalization and non-recognition by governments and other ethnic groups, poverty, HIV and AIDS, illiteracy, and now COVID-19. Since 1992, indigenous people of Africa have entered the international arena to fight for their recognition, for their land, for their languages and their culture. It has not been easy. For the recent years, many indigenous activists have faced intimidation, arrest, and even death as they fought for their rights of their communities. At the same time, remarkable achievements have been made in the last 10 years, which are giving us the confidence and determination to continue with the struggle. And I think it is in this light we try to protect our livelihood, our culture, our land, in order to maintain our food sovereignty. I know we have a lot to hear from other people. I will end by saying happy celebration to all who are part of this event, and thank you all for listening. Thank you.
For all indigenous peoples, much love, strength, and courage for all our relations. Mauri ora, good health.
And that was our brother. Thank you, Ali, for those words. And that was our brother, Anaru Fraser from Maori from Aotearoa, New Zealand. And with this, we honor, as our sister Ali said, all indigenous peoples, but the over 380 million people that the civil society indigenous peoples mechanism represent. And we are here today, but we are here also representing all of our people on the ground, farmers, pastoralists, fisher folks, consumers. And with that, we will pass the word to the CFS chair, Tanawat, Mr. Tanawat Tiensen. And I apologize if I said your name. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind invitation to let me join these special events. Distinguished delegates, CSM friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to congratulate and thank the civil society mechanism for organizing this event and bringing together too many voices from all corners of the world to discuss the basic principle, everyone's right to adequate food, which actually I think is very important that we have right to adequate food, as some of you mentioned earlier. In your 10th anniversaries, it is very good to see civil society mechanisms, CSM, so lively and vital. It means that the Committee on World Food Securities is equal vital as you are. The histories of the reform CSF and the histories of the civil society mechanism CSMs go hand in hand. Indeed, The CFS, as we know it today, exists because of civil society and social movement who urged a reform of the Committee on World Food Security, which would allow a more active participation of the civil society in the global governance of food securities and nutrition. And we want to make sure that your voice are being heard. You and your colleagues 10 years ago told us very clearly, you cannot decide something about us without us. Another basic principle, one would say, but unfortunately one that it is not always applied. Luckily, 10 years ago, CFS members heard your voice and agree on the reform of the Committee on World Food Security, CFS, making the CFS become something very unique in the UN system, the most inclusive, multi-stakeholders and intergovernmental space and platform for food securities and nutrition. And 10 years later, today, the active participation of the civil society is still indispensable for fulfilling the 2030 agenda and achieving SDG 2, zero hunger. Too many people in the world suffer from hunger and malnutrition, as all of us know, and which actually one of our contributors and also the advisory group of the CFS, the World Food Program, just received the Nobel Prize with their well-deserved. Which actually we can say that the world hear our voice. The world see the importance of the issues of food securities. And they want, and that's why we need to work together to make sure that we can achieve SDG 2 and also 2030 agenda. And as I mentioned earlier, there are too many people in the world suffer from hungers and malnutrition, and COVID-19 pandemic just this year has further deteriorated the situation and pushing many more people into food insecurities, which actually I think all of us have heard a lot around the world. In many countries, local people, indigenous people are facing with food insecurities due to COVID-19 pandemic. And we are facing unprecedented challenges which we can address only if we working together to make the right to adequate food from the community to global level become real for everybody. We should all make use of the governing power of the Committee on World Food Security, CFS, to provide leadership and drive policy cohesion and coherence to improve the food systems and make them healthier and more sustainable, more resilient for people and for the planet, to make sure that everyone can afford and get access to healthy food. We have a clear opportunities to do so by completing the voluntary guideline on food system and nutrition, and also the policy recommendation and agroecological and other innovative approaches before the UN Food System Summit 2021. As all of you now, and all of you know that these years, even though we are facing with the situation of the COVID-19, We could not have the physical meeting or negotiation for the two work stream on voluntary guideline on food system and nutrition, and also policy recommendation on agroecological and other innovative approach. We need to adjust ourselves. We need all flexibilities of all of you to make sure that we can discuss and we can negotiate to finalize both the global policy guideline. On this point, I urge you and your representative to be constructive throughout the end of the two policy convergent processes, which actually we expecting that by the end of this year, we could manage to finalize the products. As you have been so far, as we need these two policy guidance to be useful and also actionable tools in the hand of the decision maker. Once they have the global policy products with their commitment, with their political views, we would like to see the next step about the implementation and the uptake of the policies to transform our food system, to make sure that we can lead to sustainable food system for all. My last message to you today is about the result and outcomes, as I mentioned earlier. And I'm sharing this message with all FAO and RBA members in all of FAO regional conferences, which I'm attending as chairperson of the Committee on World Food Security, CFS, or even though when I had an opportunity to meet and discuss with WFP country teams all over the world and also the IFAD colleagues, to make sure that once we have the global policy guidance, we need action on ground. We need action at the country level. And we want to make sure that all the policies or the global policy products are translated into action by support of the three Rome-based agency, FAO, WFP, IFAD, and also others UN agencies. But we also need leadership and ownership of the members of the governments with support of other stakeholders, civil societies, private sectors, and others, to make sure that those policies will be implemented at the country level as such. I strongly believe that the CFS work has never been more relevant than before, and we are tackling tough issues like food system, nutrition, agroecology, gender, and we are producing, as all of you know, that the CFS, we are producing the high quality policy documents. I think some of you have known it already, like the voluntary guideline on responsible governance of tenure of land, fisheries, and forests in the context of national food securities, VGGT, which actually I can show you again, this book, which actually I know that FAO and other partners and members helps and support to make sure that these VGGTs are being implemented in 140 countries and make an impact on ground. And also the others are policies on principles for responsible investment in agriculture and food system, right principles, and also the framework for action for food securities and nutrition in protracted crisis. With the input of the high-level panel of experts and all other stakeholders, because you invest your time, you invest your energies to have agreed document, to have agreed policies, global policies for further implementation. However, all the effort we are making with these products will be in vain if they are poorly known and rarely implemented at the ground level. And we need to show that the CFS work leads to concrete results, as it is not enough to simply identify problems without a concrete plan about how to implement those recommendations. So if you have ideas, if you know how we can show concrete results, if you know how we can make a positive change, let's do it together. And we need your support. And all of you are our champion to make things happen on ground at the country level. And thank you very much again for inviting me to your celebration this year. And I wish you a successful meeting and events after this. And also tomorrow, as you know, that we will have a CFS high-level special event during 13 to 15 of October, and all of you are invited, and looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will be there. And this process of to bring the achievements from Rome to our home communities is also a concern and a big commitment from us as well. So we look forward to working with you and the rest of your team and states to make that happen. We appreciate you being here with us. We understand you have other commitments today. So you will not be able to be with us fully. But to all the participants who are here joining us, we thank you. We will be hearing now from the story of the CSM, and then we will be hearing the demands that we have as well as civil society and indigenous peoples mechanism, and where we are now as we face unprecedented times and an unprecedented food crisis. Which links it back to our story of why we were created. I now pass the word to my sister Editrudith, who will be co-moderating the next section of our story. We will be hearing from great leaders and people part of the CSM. I pass the word to you, sister. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my sister Nicole. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on your time zone. It's really a pleasure for me to have this opportunity to co-moderate this session in honor of the 10th anniversary of the civil society mechanism for relations with the CFS. I would like, before I continue, to thank you, Mr. Tanawasis. Sorry if I've mispronounced your name, the CFS chair, for sharing with us this part of this historical moment, and especially acknowledging the active role played by the CSM towards fulfilling the Agenda 2030. So this is very important, and we are grateful that to have you with us today, and I would like to welcome all the other participants as well. So the next session that's coming on now, we are going to have a reflection of some of the key and important moments of CSM during its journey from the reform of the CFS up until today. We will have speakers to guide us through these reflections, and each one of them will have a moment that they will share. They will guide us together, we reflect our path together through these 10 years. And after these presentations and these reflection moments, we'll have an open discussion from the audience that I would really encourage all of us to participate. So to kickstart this session now, I would like to call upon my brother, Manny Stanley, from the International Indian Treaty Council from Panama. Manny will share with us a poem, and please, Manny, I would like to welcome you now. You're welcome.
Bueno, buenos días a todas y a todos. Voy a leer un poema, La mujer sin rostro. Primero quisiera, antes de leer el poema, saludar a todos los amigos y amigas que se encuentran escuchándonos y observándonos. Este poema se escribió en el seno de las reuniones del mecanismo de sociedad civil hace ya varios años, cuando se iba a elaborar el informe acerca del uso y la aplicación de las directrices sobre el derecho a la alimentación. También quisiera saludar a todos los organizadores, a los intérpretes, al presidente del CSA. Y bueno, sin más que agregar, les voy a leer La mujer sin rostro. Bueno, voy a hacer una pequeña introducción. Como dije, este poema se elaboró escuchando a las participantes, escuchando sobre sus problemáticas, escuchando su convivencia, y los poemas de uno casi siempre no son de uno, siempre son de la colectividad. Entonces, ahora sí, La mujer sin rostro. Hay una mujer campesina sin rostro, sin nombre, que alimenta al mundo, que renace cada mañana en Uganda, en Myanmar, Colombia o Palestina. Lleva tatuado su nombre en los callos de sus manos. Está desnuda, cubierta de semillas rojas, negras, amarillas y blancas. No le interesa las ODS o el CSA o cientos de siglas. Mujer sin tierra, pintada de colores. Ella es bambú, humo de hojarasca. Ella es nube, agua, mujer árbol, mujer planta, mujer de fuego. La mujer sin rostro es asesinada 1000 veces en México, Argentina, Nigeria y toda Europa, pero renace en Brasil, en Honduras o en Sierra Leona. Tiene 1000 alientos, es campesina, es pescadora, es urbana, es arcoíris, alimenta al mundo de frijoles, maíz, arroz, yuca. Ella lucha por la tierra, el agua, por la vida y el territorio. La mujer sin rostro tiene rostro y tiene nombre. Ya. Muchas gracias y saludos a todos.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manny, for sharing with us the struggles of a woman, the struggles that women go through in bringing food on the table, in contributing to the food systems and food security and nutrition. So thank you so much for opening up this flow of us reflecting on our story, on our journey together in these 10 years of CFS and CSM. So following, I would like to welcome Nora from the Terranova, Italy, who will share with us this moment regarding, Nora will share with us on the CSF reform process itself. So Nora, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to contribute to this celebration by recalling the history of the reform of the CFS and some of the wonderful people who animated it. The first thing to note, can you change the slide, please? The first thing to note is that the impact of social movements on the reform of the CFS was rooted in 3 decades of mobilization, networking, particularly over the past 2 decades, in reaction to the impacts of neoliberal policies, starting at local level and building up to the global. The World Food Summits of 1996 and 2002, organized by FAO, and the civil society forums in parallel, provided a strong impetus for their global networking. The term food sovereignty was pronounced for the first time at global level by La Via Campesina at the 1996 forum. The movements present at the forum established a network to carry forward their engagement with global institutions, the International Planning Committee for Food Sovereignty, which in the following years facilitated the participation of hundreds of representatives of rural people's organizations in intergovernmental committees. Just one example, the negotiation of guidelines on the right to food adopted by the CFS in 2004 with very strong advocacy by IPC and CSOs, and whose use and application was monitoring, as you will remember, in the global event in the CFS in 2018. The food price crisis of 2007-2008, with riots in capital cities around the world, opened up a window of political opportunity, like the COVID crisis today, that social movements were ready to grasp thanks to all of this practice of networking and capacity building. But success in exploiting the opportunity was not automatic or easy. Powerful actors in the international community had their own ideas about how to fill the decision-making vacuum on food issues that the crisis had unveiled, which aimed at business as usual. The only proposal that sought policy-led solutions to the causes of the crisis was a proposal for reform of the existing but ineffectual UN Committee on World Food Security. And against all odds, this last option won, thanks to a particular political scenario in which alliances were possible with some key Latin American countries like Argentina, whose ambassador was the chair of the CFS at the time, and Brazil, some European countries, and with FAO. The process was very, very open and transparent, and the reform document was adopted by acclamation on 17 October 2009. These are some of the points for which civil society had fought strongly and won. The political policy dimension is foremost. It operates under a human rights framework with people seen as rights holders and agents. The CFS is recognized as the central global forum for policy coherence around negotiated guidelines and policy recommendations. It offers an opportunity to challenge dominant discourse in civil society are full participants, and the CFS is accompanied by a high-level panel of experts that operates autonomously and recognizes the expertise of practitioners in social movements. It's a multi-actor space that recognizes civil society autonomy and gives priority to the voice of those most affected by food insecurity, puts private sector in a separate box, and reserves decision-making for government, so very different from the kind of multi-stakeholder platforms that we see multiplying today. Over the following months, the terms of reference and procedures for the nascent civil society mechanism were developed in consultation among international and regional networks around the world. And the resulting document was adopted by the Civil Society Forum in October 2010, just 10 years ago, and presented to the first session of the reformed CFS the following week. You can go to the last slide. At that same session, civil society took the other participants by surprise and pretty much wrote the agenda of the first years of the CFS. This included obtaining the approval of the CFS to politically negotiate guidelines on responsible tenure of land and other natural resources in a night session that went on until 3 in the morning. And this is an excellent final point on which to hand over to Angel, who will take the story onwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. That was very, very powerful. Thank you so much. And now let's invite invite Angela, who will help us remember the process towards development of one of the key outcomes of the CFS, which is the voluntary guidelines for the governance of tenure of land. So Angela, please, the floor is yours.
Is it true that?
Yes.
Angel is still struggling to come into the call. We are trying to, there's some problem with the registration, so maybe you go to the next in the list. Please.
All right, okay. So thank you for this information. So let's welcome now Shalmali Gutta, who is representing Focus on the Global South. Yeah. Shalmali will take us through the RAI process. Shalmali, I hope.
Hello, everybody. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good evening to everybody from India, a rural part of India. And it's a great pleasure. It's an honor to be able to share a little bit of the CSM's very interesting and shall we say complex history. So let me jump right into the issue of RAI. Now, RAI is the acronym for the CFS Principles for Responsible Investment in Agriculture and Food Systems. And this was adopted, these were adopted, I think, in 2014 at the CFS. I made some notes and I'm going to be reading them off my computer, so I'm going to be looking at my screen and at you as well. Now, although for the RAI process began in 2011 in the CFS, for us, for CSM, the process actually goes all the way back to October 2010, where at the first session since its reform, the first CFS since its reform, the CFS refused to endorse the principles for responsible agriculture investment, PRAI, that had been developed by the World Bank, IFAD, FAO, and UNCTAD. And many of us in the CSM and our allies outside considered this set of principles, the PRAI, to be a cover-up for land, territory, and resource grabbing. Instead, member states agreed that agriculture investment should be addressed within the space of the CFS from a viewpoint of contributing to food security and the right to food. And CSM played a very important role in this victory. Then the CSM Agriculture Investment Working Group was formed in 2011 with the main overarching objectives to achieve more support and opportunities for small-scale food producers and their models of production through enabling public policies, and also protecting small-scale food producers and workers from corporate takeover and human rights abuses. And there were a number of other overarching objectives which you will find on the CSM website. Now, despite very important gains towards our objectives in subsequent policy work of the CFS, the domination of international trade regulations over food security concerns continue to be prominent. Now, it is against this background that CSM decided that we will engage intensively in the RAI negotiations. And in 2013 and 2014, we conducted extensive consultations in all the CSM constituencies and regions, and we used every space we could find, including even the World Social Forum in Tunisia, or every World Social Forum or Regional Social Forum. Of course, we also participated in the formal CFS consultation for RAI. And now, based on all these consultations, we agreed on 6 points that will guide and shape our engagement in the RAI process. So for us, we said the responsible investment in agriculture must first be anchored in a rights-based framework. Secondly, it must clearly recognize small-scale producers and workers as the main investors in agriculture. Third, include a commitment to create decent work and respect workers' rights and to overcome discrimination against women. Fourth, support peasant-based agroecological production systems and local food systems and markets and the defense of people's access to and control over land, forest, water, seeds, and fisheries. Fifth, prioritize effective public policies and investment that support and defend small-scale producers, workers, and local food systems. Include a strong role for states to monitor the principles in an inclusive way. Now, at every occasion, at every meeting of the open-ended working group, we emphasize that responsible investment cannot be part of or support any initiative that leads to the grabbing of land, water, natural resources, and that the principles should actually be a key instrument to stop the continuing ongoing natural resource grabbing. Now, we fought very hard, but we did not get enough to be able to consider the final negotiated document as acceptable on the basis of our 6 guiding points. We accepted that we had some important victories. For example, respect for decent work and workers' rights, the elimination of discrimination against women, the issue of governance and accountability, the recognition of the important roles of small-scale producers and workers in agricultural investment. I mean, the roles were recognized rather than saying they were not there at all. And the recognition in some language of the importance of the progressive realization of the right to food. But overall, the document places the interests of big business over those of small-scale producers, agricultural workers, and those most vulnerable to hunger. And some specific places where the document falls short. One is on the reference to human rights, which are consistently undermined by repeated references to trade agreements and rules, which are considered more important than human rights. Also, a very big setback was that the principle of free, prior, informed consent was undermined, weakened by a qualifying language that was placed there to please a particular member state. And this is a universally recognized standard on the rights of indigenous people, which unfortunately in a right to food space was undermined. The principles do not support peasant-based agroecological production and local food systems and markets. They also do not have language to effectively address the defense of people's access to and control over land, territories, forest, water, resources, and fisheries. So in short, the principles did not help us in our aim to stop land and resource grabbing. The principles do not prioritize effective public policies and investment that support small-scale producers, workers, and local food systems. They also don't address imbalances in power. And a serious issue also for us was that the tenure guidelines, for example, what are called the BGGT by the CFS, and we call them the tenure guidelines, are a document where all the principles are to be implemented and respected by all stakeholders equally. Whereas in the RAI, it's a cherry-picking document. So the principles allow stakeholders to pick up and choose and implement what suits them, which of course is a problem because then they can be interpreted and just, implemented to suit large investors or those interests or stakeholders that support large investors. And if this already started happening very soon after the RAI principles were adopted. But on our side, we didn't stop either from CSM. We have continued our struggles, we've continued our efforts to keep drawing attention to and drawing the attention of public policy makers back to the relationships between trade investment, public policies, the right to food, and human rights. And we have done this through a number of subsequent policy processes, from smallholders to markets. In agroecology, we're doing this in food systems, in the guidelines for local food systems. And so, we have continued that emphasis that no kind of market-based trade or investment can sort of supersede the right to food and human rights. I think I'll stop here, and thank you very much again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Shalmali, for all these wonderful moments. And I understand confining ourselves in 5 years speaking time is not easy because we have a lot to share. So yeah, that's understandable. But again, I would like to call upon those who will be coming after to try to shorten a bit so that we are in time and we are able to cover all we want to share today, but also to allow conversation among us from the other audiences who would also like to share. So that being said, I would like to invite, I understand some of our colleagues are struggling to join. So right now I'd like to invite Maria Noela from Maela and Alberta, who will share with us also some of the critical moments, including the CSM agenda setting and policy influencing within the CFS. Yeah.
Now, Angel is in the call, just to tell you.
All right.
Finally, he's coming. He's in. Yes.
Okay. I had not seen her. Okay. You are welcome then. So the floor is yours now. You are welcome.
Ángel, adelante.
Buenos días, compañeras. La verdad, una emoción muy grande. Muchas gracias por estar aquí. Bueno, ustedes saben, voy a hablar con un compañero que he trabajado varios años con todos ustedes, con todas ustedes. Algunas son nuevas o nuevos. Quiero saludar a todos, al presidente de la sesión, al secretariado, a ti, Edith, Trudit, y a todas las compañeras y compañeros, y decirle a María Noé que siempre los que van cerrando son los que más se escuchan. Así que gracias por cederme de nuevo el lugar, María Noé. Un abrazo. ¿Cómo está la República Oriental? Voy a ser muy breve porque me parece que lo que uno quiere hacer en estos momentos celebrativos es levantar las cosas que más nos impresionaron en estos años y que hemos vivido. La primera es, no he podido poner la imagen de la compañera Chandrika Sharma, una luchadora incansable por las trabajadoras de la pesca a pequeña escala, en particular las mujeres y sus comunidades, y la imagen también de Stefano Palmentier, ¿no? Que hace poco, bueno, partió y debe estarnos haciendo música de algún lugar de las galaxias, seguro en este momento nos hace música de fondo. ¿Qué tenemos para rescatar? Bueno, creo que desde donde yo estuve como delegado y representante, y ahora ya hemos cambiado la Vía Campesina, Club Vía Campesina, cambió por la compañera Nuri, me han pedido que acompañe, que siga tratando en el grupo de trabajo Tierra, Territorio, Biodiversidad, para lo cual es un honor y espero hacer bien el trabajo de asistir siempre a las compañeras y compañeros, especialmente a Nuri, que estamos haciendo un proceso de transición, ¿no? Yo rescataría, además de los compañeros vivos y los compañeros que partieron, ese gran trabajo en grupo que hicimos, más de 40 personas. Los que éramos los voceros teníamos siempre detrás ángeles guardianes. En mi caso me tocaba Chandrika Sharma, ¿no? Y fue realmente impresionante sentirse fuerte cuando uno tenía que tomar la palabra para cuando peleamos y disputamos en las directrices de la tierra, los bosques y la pesca, ¿no? Que finalizó el año que viene, van a ser los 10 años, ¿no? Recuerdo muy bien un día sábado, 12 de mayo de 2012. Y lo central, para mí lo central fue haber podido dar prioridad a las mujeres como agricultoras, a las mujeres como campesinas, a las mujeres de los pueblos indígenas, de la pesca artesanal, las mujeres pastoralistas. El documento refuerza permanentemente eso. Lo segundo es que nos incorporaron compañeros, estamos adentro de un documento guía orientativo. Yo diría un documento maestro del derecho de acceso a la tierra y a las aguas, a la pesca, al pastoralismo, ¿no? Que son las directrices estas, ¿verdad? Por más que sean voluntarias. Entonces, rescatar esto, ¿no? Figura en muchísimos de los párrafos nuestra existencia, el reconocimiento de los estados del mundo, la agricultura familiar, campesina, la pesca artesanal, los pueblos indígenas, no me cansaré nunca a decirlo, los pastores y pastoras del mundo. O sea, nos han dado entidad, existencia y obviamente participación, por eso está este mecanismo y está celebrando los 10 años. Lo otro que tenemos que rescatar que fue las más duras batallas. Las más duras batallas fueron que se hable de reformas distributivas, y hay un capítulo que se habla, y que se habla de los pueblos indígenas. Ahí tuvimos algunas pequeñas derrotas, ¿no? Sobre todo con algunos países o estados, pero creo que la batalla madre de la batalla fue que acepten que los sin tierra, las sin tierra, puedan acceder a la tierra. Fue realmente un debate de más de 24 horas y terminamos haciendo que acepten todos los estados del mundo que las sin tierra, los sin tierra tienen derecho a la tierra. Y un segundo punto, esto de la ocupación de estados por otros estados, ¿no? Que aún seguimos viendo. No es poca cosa esas tremendas victorias que dimos en ese documento, que está incorporado todo eso. Aunque, por supuesto, siempre nos duele recordar que hubiéramos querido que se hable del agua y del cambio climático. Fue muy suave eso, no se incorporó con la fuerza que nosotros queríamos, pero quiero decir, para redondear, como una manera de homenaje y agradecimiento, gracias por continuar, gracias por ser un bloque que discute primero adentro de nosotros, de la sociedad civil, de los movimientos sociales, de las organizaciones sociales, de las organizaciones que nos acompañan, pero que también lideran, que no sean nuestros peoncitos, todas a las que le llamamos ONG o organizaciones de acompañamiento. Todos tenemos que sentirnos que lideramos en un bloque consistente, porque cuando llegamos a la sala de sesiones, los estados sienten esa energía, sienten esa fuerza, esa mística que nos ha caracterizado siempre y que nos ha dado muchas victorias y algunas derrotas, pero tendremos que seguir disputándola. Muchas gracias, muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, my brother Egidio. You have really reminded us of these processes. There are moments of struggles, but also there are moments of glory that we celebrated. So this is very good. And one thing that I've noted from you is the importance of placing women at the center. This is very important because of the significant role that women play in the food production processes. So thank you so much. And also, you've reminded us of our, fellows, our colleagues who have passed away. Reminded us of Chandrika and the role that she has played, but also Stefano Pamienta. So yeah, thank you again. May I ask if we have Najiru already with us here?
No.
Not yet. Okay.
I think he has connectivity problems because we cannot reach him either by phone.
Oh. And Nasik, is he with us? No, not
No,
yet.
no.
Okay. So with this, can we go to the video now? Seeking clarification from the Secretariat.
Yes, Judith, I think Maria Noel and Alberta will guide us in this final part of that, and then we can show the videos afterwards.
Oh, okay. So thank you, Teresa, for this. May I now welcome Maria Noel and Alberta, who will take us through the CSM agenda setting process. Alberta, please, you're welcome. You're muted.
Shall I go first?
No, yeah, you can go first. It's between
Okay.
you and Maria Noel, so whoever can start, you're welcome if you're ready right now.
Okay, so I can start. So hi everybody, I'm really happy and excited to be with so many old friends that I mean with whom I really made this long journey in the last 10 years. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I have and also all my memories and really love to the person and our comrades that left us but are always with us. Absolutely, Chandrika and Stefan will always be with us in any CFS work beyond our life. So I had the pleasure to talk about the struggle around women's rights that was, as being said before, one of the key struggle that we had as a CSM to put really women in the center. And this struggle started since the beginning. And if I can just recall the main steps, I remember the negotiation of the CFS policy recommendation on the gender, food security, and nutrition that was held at the CFS 37 in the now, it seems 1 century ago, in 2011. And then we managed to have a very and key important high-level forum on women's empowerment that took place in 2017, and that culminated with a summary that was then adopted by the CFS in 2017. And through these steps, what we tried to do and we managed to do was really to have a much stronger recognition of the centrality of women's rights. If I may summarize this struggle, identified like 4 main lines. The first, since 2009, 2010, and even before, we engaged with the CFS policy recommendations on gender and women's empowerment. One of the lines that we committed was to really defend it and stress women as a human being in their own. And so reject, challenge this concept of women pivotal to food security of their families, households, community, children, which is absolutely extremely important, but at the same time, for us, it was really crucial to recognize women's own rights. One other aspect that was really part of our struggle was to recognize the interdependence between food security and women's rights, because we had many times to defend the issue that we can't achieve food security for women without addressing discrimination, violence against women, and so all the different forms and multiple discriminations that women suffer. And there is, as you know, I mean, in our long journey, this is not something that most of the many governments accepted. We had many times to push back to this narrative that in the CFS we just have to deal with women's and food security without addressing all the other forms of discrimination. And this was something that we always pushed back, and we managed to. Then I would say how, but we managed to challenge this narrative. The other line that I identified was the looking beyond the economic dimension. So against this narrative that we need to focus just on women's empowerment, economic empowerment, and we try to challenge this concept. We try to bring into the room the concept that it's not just the economic dimension we need to look at, but we need to look at the social and the political and many other dimensions if we want to really achieve women's rights and food security. And the fourth line was around the narrative of empowerment versus the narrative of autonomy. Many times and still now, I mean, we know that the mainstream language is around women's empowerment, but women's empowerment implies that we consider the current system as a given. And what we need to do is just to enable women to benefit and to adapt to this system. When we worked for the high-level forum on women's empowerment with many of you in this meeting, one of our biggest point was it's not enough. This is not what we want to achieve. We want to recognize the transformational potential of women. We want to support their alternatives. We want to dismantle the gender norms which are rooted and embedded in this patriarchal system that we have as a dominant system. So it's not just about adapting, it's really just, it's about recognizing and supporting women's own alternatives. So along these 4 lines that for me summarize a bit our main struggle, we managed to engage in the forum, we managed to get this language recognized within the CFS, and this language is now present in the CFS policy documents, because we have very clearly stated that it's absolutely important to emphasize that the gender equality, women's and girls' rights, and women's empowerment are absolutely central for their food security and nutrition. And the recognition of these 3 elements going together, I think that was the most important achievements that we managed to get in our negotiations and in our policy discussions. Now we have the process of the CFS guidelines, and of course all what we gained will be the starting point for the future. So I will stop here. I will pass the floor to my friends, Maria Noel.
Thank you, Alberta. I think Maria Noel is here. Please take the floor. Okay.
Hola, ¿me escuchan? ¿Me escuchan?
Sí.
Sí,
Perfecto.
sigue.
Bueno, ¿cómo están? La verdad, re contenta de ver tanta gente querida, con los que hemos recorrido, bueno, trayectos largos, agradables y de los otros, pero contenta de compartir este espacio. Contenta con el día que soy, de resistencia, de resiliencia, de propuesta, seguimos. Y también, como decía Ángel, ¿no? Tantos compañeros que se fueron en este proceso. Yo quería recordar en particular a Estefan, que nos dejó este año, como un amigo querido y que, como dice Ángel, andará por ahí haciendo música. Martín me decía, bueno, ¿cómo hablar de la construcción de la agenda en este espacio de Naciones Unidas, ¿no? En el Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria, pero también con FAO, en particular con FAO de las 3 agencias de Naciones Unidas, ¿no? Yo me había notado algunos puntos que con el diario del lunes, como decimos acá en Uruguay, podemos contar cómo ha sido el proceso. El primer punto que es clave y que va casi en el sentido opuesto de lo que planteaba el presidente, ¿no? Cómo aplicar en los territorios después que sale la definición en el Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria, los movimientos sociales al revés, ¿no? Partimos de lo acumulado en el territorio, los que hacemos agroecología, desde el MAELA, desde todas las organizaciones articuladas y los movimientos articulados en el CIP y después en el mecanismo de la sociedad civil, hacemos agroecología en el territorio. De hecho, hoy les cuento que estamos en día de plantación de papa, estamos en luna menguante, así que nos toca plantación de papa hoy. Y partimos de lo acumulado en el territorio para poder construir después hacia arriba las políticas públicas que fortalezcan esa identidad que tiene que ver con la construcción de derechos en los espacios de producción de alimentos. Entonces, el primer trabajo que hemos hecho como movimientos sociales, como organizaciones vinculadas a la producción de alimentos, ha sido la articulación entre nosotros, el fortalecimiento y el reconocimiento de esos procesos y de esas construcciones desde el territorio que tienen que ver con los procesos agroecológicos, que tienen que ver con la soberanía alimentaria, para defender en conjunto eso frente a las propuestas de Naciones Unidas y frente a las propuestas de los Estados miembros. El segundo elemento que creo que es importante es que muchos conocíamos países en los que vivíamos o países hermanos que trabajaban en políticas públicas en agroecología o agroecología vinculada a la agricultura familiar, y eso nos posibilitaba generar puntos de encuentro con esas políticas, pero que necesitaban ser evidenciadas en espacios internacionales como el Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria. Y ese diálogo también lo hemos construido desde ahí, desde lo nacional hacia lo internacional. Otro elemento que tomamos en cuenta y que pudimos trabajar es la construcción del diálogo con la propia FAO, ¿no? Cómo hablar de agroecología en un espacio o en una institución donde en principio era casi mala palabra y después empezó a ser un proceso de habilitación, de discusión de alternativas que fueran propuestas desde las organizaciones de pequeños productores de alimentos y no desde el gran sector privado que privilegiaba otras formas de dominación del territorio, ¿no? Entonces para nosotros fue clave empezar a tener ese diálogo directo con FAO, donde nos reconociéramos como interlocutores, pero también desde las lógicas distintas que representamos y que habitamos. En ese proceso con FAO se dieron los 2 seminarios, los 2 simposios internacionales, también con un increciendo de la participación de los movimientos sociales en esos espacios, un proceso de articulación con un equipo formado posterior de agroecología en la FAO, que nos permite dialogar con altos y bajos en nuestra concepción de agroecología para que eso se transforme después en políticas públicas recomendadas para los estados. Otro punto tenía que ver con la academia, ¿no? Cómo fortalecer los lazos con la academia en términos de visibilización, la academia comprometida con la agroecología. Ustedes saben que estos espacios internacionales tienen un denominador común que son los famosos papers, hay mucho documento escrito, que fue parte de los cuestionamientos con los que hemos tenido que trabajar. ¿Dónde está la evidencia? Nosotros la vivimos a diario, la evidencia de la agroecología por la soberanía alimentaria, pero muchas veces los papers son los que hacen que eso se evidencie para determinados sectores, ¿no? Entonces el diálogo con la academia comprometida con la agroecología también fue fundamental para visibilizar y fortalecer esos papers. Otro elemento central tiene que ver con cómo nosotros incluíamos la agroecología y el debate sobre la agroecología en cualquiera de los ejes de discusión que se daban en el Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria y que se dan. Esa fue una estrategia que trabajamos a lo largo de todos los temas, porque entendíamos que la agroecología es el modelo que viene de los territorios, político, económico, ambiental, social, para dar respuesta a la crisis alimentaria, ¿no? Entonces, desde ese lugar también se trabajó en forma, digamos, transversal a todos los ejes. Y después, un tema que nos parece central, que sigue siendo muy vigente, y en este contexto más, es la defensa del concepto de agroecología. A partir de que empezó a ser más visible en algunos ámbitos internacionales la agroecología, primero nos encontramos con un proceso de paralelización, por llamarlo de alguna forma, de hablar en paralelo de la agroecología como otros sistemas o técnicas productivas, ¿no? Como la intensificación sostenible, como la agricultura climáticamente inteligente, y otras que se ponían al mismo nivel que la agroecología. Esa fue una primera etapa de la discusión, entender qué es agroecología, y la segunda fue una banalización, ¿no? Como bajarle el perfil a la agroecología. Entonces también el sector privado entraba a hablar de agroecología, y ahí una estrategia muy fuerte de defender cuál es la agroecología que privilegiamos, cuál es la agroecología que vivimos desde los pequeños productores de alimentos y desde ese lugar construir los diálogos que teníamos con los Estados miembros. Y después, un elemento más, no me quiero ir de tema, ustedes saben que me gusta hablar, es tener claro el alcance de las recomendaciones que salían después del Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria, cualquier sea el tema. ¿Por qué? Porque cuando hablamos de agroecología hablamos con un enfoque basado en un enfoque de derechos. Cuando hablamos de soberanía alimentaria hablamos basados en un enfoque de derechos. Entonces nos parecía clave que a la hora de pensar las implementaciones se trabajara también, volviéramos también a lo nacional en conjunto con los estados para poder hacer vedurías, controles de que eso se aplicara, ¿no? Y otra cuestión que es importante es tener en cuenta los contextos, el contexto en el que estamos ahora, más allá del COVID y eso, necesitamos tener claridad de eso y desde ahí actuar en agroecología y en soberanía alimentaria. No estamos en un buen momento político, estratégico, donde se visibilice la agroecología como esa estrategia que dé respuesta, ¿no? Y sin embargo los territorios seguimos trabajando y seguimos dando respuesta en alimentación. Me refiero a los estados, me refiero a los gobiernos que administran esos estados en este momento. Y sin embargo, en los territorios se ha dado como una explosión de pensar la producción ecológica, la estrategia de articulación, los mercados locales, como una estrategia de volver a tener esa autonomía con la que defendemos, la autonomía alimentaria, ¿no? Entonces, ese un poco es el proceso con el que hemos trabajado, o sea, los puntos de la estrategia con la que hemos abordado el tema en el Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria sobre el posicionamiento de la agroecología. Esta lucha sigue, esta lucha continúa con distintas estrategias de un lado y de otro, y necesitamos fortalecer este proceso juntos sobre la discusión de la agroecología. Les mando un abrazo a todos y a las órdenes.
Thank you so much, Maria Noel, for this piece of story. It's part of the 10 years anniversary of the CSM. And yeah, what a journey that we have gone through together. We've had a lot of moments of highs and lows. We have had moments of tears and gloomy faces, but also laughters and cheers. So we are learning a lot from these experiences. So before we open up the floor for open discussion, I would like to welcome Marion, who will explain briefly about the video, 2 minutes video that we are going to watch. And from there, then we'll have session to share, and we'll welcome public to contribute your ideas, your experiences through this journey. So you're welcome, Marion. I hope you are there and you are hearing me.
Yes, hello. I believe we are going to be sharing with you the video that is actually the voice of Silvia Magliari, who, if I'm not wrong, is with us today. I think the video is self-explanatory, and yes, my colleague Teresa is sharing it with you. Thank you.
Has plagued the world at an unprecedented scale, while the global pandemic has uncovered the fragility and unsustainability of the neoliberal framework in the current food systems. Real systemic solutions are urgently needed to combat and reverse the rise in global hunger. We want change that would realize an equitable food system that is not dominated by transnational corporations and big business, trampling on rural people's rights on land, production, and resources. I am Silvia Magliari from the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, and I am hungry for change.
I am also hungry for change. So, yeah, so thank you so much for this short video. This having said, I would like to now welcome my colleague, my dear sister, Nicole, as a co-moderator who will take us through the next session. Nicole, are you still with us?
Yes, of course. I would like to ask the Secretariat to see if we're gonna have some moments of open discussion, or if we're going to move into the second part, and how we radically imagine the food system, which will be moderated by our sister Neti.
Well, my suggestion would be, Nicole, that you at least should have opened the floor for 10, 15 minutes, so that I think people have something to say. No? Although I don't know, that is, yeah, 10, 15 maybe.
Thank you, Martin. If there's any questions or comments, please put an asterisk, a star on the chat box, and we will be able to open the floor for you. And if there's any questions, you can also type them, please, here on the chat box, so the panelists and everybody who presented today can answer. Okay, we will start with Silke from Germany, who wants to take the floor. Silke, please go ahead.
Hello to everybody. Can you hear me okay? I hope so. I'm speaking on behalf of Germany. It was very good to listen to all of you, and thanks for sharing your experiences and messages. Thank you also for this invitation, and many congratulations for the 10th anniversary of the CSM. This is a very special day for you, and in particular for the indigenous people, but it's also a special day for all of us, as we strongly believe that only with the participation of the CSM and other stakeholders, we can guarantee an inclusive process in producing valuable input at a global level. We value your expertise in the field and encourage you to keep up your important work in adding your voice within the CFS as a leading multi-stakeholder platform in the area of food security and nutrition. As you very nicely put it, nothing about us without us. We are all in this together, and we, for our part, will continue to cherish this fruitful exchange with you. Thanks a lot, and all the best for you. Over to you.
Thank you, Silke. I will pass it to Saúl Vicente. Saúl, tienes la palabra.
Muchas gracias, estimada Nicole. Mis palabras solamente decirles que me encuentro muy emocionado en este 10º aniversario del mecanismo de la sociedad civil, y sobre todo de ver y escuchar a hermanas y hermanos de hace muchos años en esta lucha, y que estuvieron presentes en ese proceso inicial para garantizar y lograr que hoy tengamos un mecanismo de la sociedad civil que cumple 10 años y que ahora incorpora también la referencia a nuestros pueblos indígenas, en lo cual quiero agradecerles a todas y todos ellos por haber hecho posible esto, porque de esa manera también estamos reconociendo los derechos de nuestros pueblos indígenas, que han ganado también su reconocimiento en duras batallas en el sistema de Naciones Unidas. Agradecer a las y los panelistas, nuestras hermanas y hermanos, que nos recordaron todas ese recorrido de trabajo que ha hecho el mecanismo de la sociedad civil y pueblos indígenas, y sobre todo ver que están allí, que siguen nuestras hermanas y hermanos en sus luchas, en sus territorios, en sus comunidades, y refrendar nuestro compromiso para seguir juntos con todas y todos ellos desde nuestros pueblos. Felicidades a todas y todos por este 10º aniversario y homenaje a nuestras hermanas y hermanos que han partido antes que nosotros. Muchas gracias, Nicole. Muchas gracias, hermanas y hermanos.
Gracias, estimado Saúl. Ahora le pasamos la palabra a Nemo Amaral de Copfram de Brasil.
¿Aló? ¿Aló?
Hola, Nemo.
¿Te escuchamos, Nemo? Nemo, si te escuchamos, adelante.
¿Aló? ¿Aló? ¿Aló?
Sí, Nemo, te escuchamos. Te escuchamos bien.
Habla Alberto.
Alberto.
¿Sí? ¿Puedo hablar?
Sí, pon tu vídeo si es posible.
Sí, no sé si consigo, no sé cómo. A todas las homenajes, a todas a la gente que participaron de esta lucha y felicitar por el aniversario de este grande logro, de esa grande conquista para la seguridad y para la soberanía alimentaria. Un saludo muy grande a todos los panelistas, a todo el secretariado, a todas las personas también anónimas que han luchado mucho. Yo me gustó mucho de esa expresión, que tuvimos muchas lágrimas, pero también muchos risos. Creo que este es un proceso que podemos probar el mundo, que cuando hay participación, cuando se creen las organizaciones, las cosas pueden ser hechas mejores. Y vivimos en un mundo de mucho retroceso. Por eso nosotros tenemos que reafirmar los espacios de participación para que nosotros possamos ser escuchados. Me gustaría dizer também que quando Nora falava um pouco da história, me passava uma película na cabeça, porque me recordava de tantos momentos extremamente importantes de luta, de proposta, de negociações. É claro que como dizia Estrapação, nunca sempre, não podemos dizer que sempre fomos vitoriosos, também tivemos pérdidas, tivemos derrotas, pero sempre propondo para poder alcançar os objetivos. Portanto, me somo às homenagens e que tudo isso possa servir de estímulo para que possamos prosseguir renovando e lutando e fazendo com que esse espaço possa se aperfeiçoar e ser cada vez mais valorizado. Graças.
Gracias, querido Alberto, por tus palabras. Muchas gracias. Le pasamos la palabra a Brian Baldwin del sector privado. Mr. Brian Baldwin, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if I'm on video. I wish I was, because I've appreciated seeing all of you. My many congratulations to the civil society mechanism and the Secretariat in Rome and all the partners in the CSM throughout the world for their work over the last 10 years in the Committee for World Food Security. The private sector mechanism also benefited from the okay, I'm on video now, thank you. The private sector mechanism has also benefited from the CFS reform document in being able to join you, the civil society mechanism, at the table to discuss many of the issues concerning food security and nutrition that have been priorities for the CFS and the member states. And I think that's been of great benefit to the member states, that it's been able to hear the voices of the private sector together with the voices of the civil society mechanism, which you've all highlighted and emphasized with your comments this afternoon. And in closing, again, congratulations for the work over the last 10 years. The private sector mechanism look forward to continuing to work in the CFS, but also together with yourselves, the CSM. As the chair of the CFS himself said this afternoon, let's work together constructively. Let's look for actionable outputs from the CFS that all our members can use. Thank you. Again, congratulations and good afternoon.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for your comments and words. Now we're gonna pass the floor to Hamadi Mohammed from Mali. Hamadi, you have the word. Hamadi, you have the word. I think we lost Hamadi. Teresa.
Yes, we will try our best to see if we can get him again online.
Okay. If anybody else wants to share any words or questions to all of our panelists, please put your name or an asterisk on the chat box. It's really good to hear from everybody and to see everybody, especially in these times when we have not been able to meet in person, especially around these very important topics that affect everybody around the world. It has been really good to see everybody, and I think if we're not able to get Hamadi, and if there's not any more questions, it has been an honor to be here with you. We have Borhan Ahmed who wants to take the floor. Borhan, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks a lot for giving me the can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I want to raise one particular position regarding FAO's position on ecology and also the GMO. At the one point, it was a very strong position to promote agroecology across the world. But at the same time, when we look at the different document and also the activities of FAO, we find that there is a promotion of GMO and hybridization also. So in this particular point, what should be the role of civil society to go for a one position that that will actually save the world and also protect and promote the rights of the small scale food producer? That is one of my question to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Borhan. Is there a panelist that would like to reply to that question? ¿Hay un panelista que quiera contestar esa pregunta?
Ahmad is joining again, Nicole. Finally, because his connection is usually not good. But he's now on the call again.
Okay, we will come back to that. And Hamadi, you have the floor. If you can turn off on your video, that would be great. Thank you. Hamadi, I think you have to unmute yourself. I think you have to unmute yourself. We cannot hear you. There.
Est-ce que vous me recevez? Allô?
We can hear you. Yep, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Est-ce que vous me recevez? Allô?
Oui, Amadi.
Allô?
Oui, Amadi.
Oui, est-ce que vous me recevez?
Oui, oui, nous te recevons.
Ok, merci beaucoup, merci beaucoup. Je sens que mon réseau n'est pas tellement solide là. Et donc, permettez-moi seulement de féliciter le CSM et exprimer mes encouragements à tous les membres du CSM. Car depuis que j'ai commencé à participer aux activités du CSM, j'ai constaté un engagement ferme à la hauteur de nombreux défis pour travailler avec le CSA et puis toutes les organisations internationales. Donc, c'est le lieu aujourd'hui de remercier tous les membres du CSM, de les féliciter, de les encourager davantage pour persévérer, parce que la tâche n'est pas aussi facile. La question des systèmes alimentaires, elle est vraiment préoccupante et très complexe. Donc, c'est pourquoi il faut être déterminé à pouvoir faire face à tous les acteurs de grande taille comme de petite taille qui essaient de perturber l'action des organisations de la société civile en ce qui concerne la satisfaction des droits à l'alimentation. Parce qu'on sait que beaucoup d'acteurs sont un peu allergiques à ce terme du droit de l'homme, surtout le droit à l'alimentation, parce que s'il n'y a pas un droit de l'alimentation, on ne peut pas exister sur cette terre. Donc, si vous permettez, je vais essayer de partager avec vous quelques expressions chez les Touaregs qui qualifient un peu les aliments principaux. Pour traduire un peu si vous voulez, la philosophie en milieu touareg, en milieu nomade qui entoure un peu les aspects nutritifs. Donc, le premier élément, c'est d'abord l'eau. L'eau est un élément de l'alimentation. Chez nous, on dit qu'en tamashek, on dit amaniman. Ça veut dire l'eau, c'est la vie. Sans eau, pas de vie. Sans eau, pas de vie. Il y a une autre expression qui dit ah isudar, c'est-à-dire le lait. Le lait, c'est le nutriment. C'est le nutriment principal pour développer l'organisme. Le troisième élément, c'est la viande. Chez nous, les Touaregs, on dit que la viande n'est qu'un goût. C'est le goût uniquement qu'on retrouve là-dedans. Et puis, le quatrième élément, c'est le repas. Le repas qui est constitué à base de céréales. On dit que le repas n'est qu'un contenu de l'estomac ou de la panse. Voilà un peu les 4 éléments qualificatifs de quelques éléments, des principaux éléments. Chez nous, les Touaregs, comment on qualifie les éléments nutritifs. Donc, sur ce, vraiment, je souhaite bon courage à tous les membres du CSM Et vraiment, je me félicite aussi que je vois ma collègue africaine est en train de faciliter un peu. J'ai oublié son nom parce que ça fait longtemps qu'on ne s'est pas retrouvés. Je la félicite. Je félicite aussi tous ceux qui facilitent cette réunion. Merci beaucoup et bonne continuation.
Merci beaucoup, Hamadi. María Noel, te paso la palabra.
Compas, solamente para brevemente compartir con el compañero un poco lo que decía, ¿no? La FAO tiene como los dos canales de apoyo a un modelo que excluye y que degrada los territorios, y por otro lado, la agroecología, o una de las alternativas a la agroecología. Queremos que eso sea más fuerte, que eso se traduzca en políticas públicas, que eso se traduzca en programas que efectivamente fortalezcan lo que venimos haciendo, muchos sin apoyo de los gobiernos. Entonces, el rol nuestro es eso, fortalecer nuestra participación en estos espacios, pero también fortaleciéndonos como organizaciones en los territorios. Son los dos caminos que tenemos que seguir fortaleciendo. Cómo seguimos trabajando en los espacios territoriales y cómo seguimos juntos todos los movimientos teniendo una vocería en común en estos espacios internacionales.
Gracias, hermana María Noel. Con esto terminamos la primera parte y pasamos la palabra a Neti, a nuestra hermana Neti, que nos estará compartiendo de cómo estamos imaginando, radicalmente imaginando los sistemas alimentarios en estos momentos. Le agradezco a todos los panelistas, le agradecemos al presidente del CCA, Tanawat, por estar con nosotros hoy, y a todos los que nos están acompañando de diferentes partes del mundo en este día que celebramos el 10º aniversario del mecanismo y el Día de los Pueblos Indígenas. La lucha sigue y seguimos produciendo, seguimos en solidaridad a través del mundo. Me despido y les mando un abrazo a todos. Saludos. Neti, te paso la palabra, hermano.
Thank you very much, and greetings to all. Thanks particularly to Nicole and Eritudit for moderating the previous sessions. I'll just introduce myself briefly. I'm Nettie Weeb. I'm an organic farmer in Canada, and I'll moderate this next hour and a bit that we have left of these sessions. We were reminded in this last session of just how rich and diverse and important the civil society and indigenous peoples mechanism has been over these last 10 years. We have lots to celebrate. The last sessions have demonstrated just how strong, how determined, and how important this work has been. So, as I said, we have much to celebrate, but there's much left to do. The civil society mechanism, the reform of the CFS, was born out of a food crisis, and we find ourselves again in a moment of pandemic and global food crisis. So going forward, we continue to have much to do. We'll begin this next component of our celebration with a video, a video from Anderson and Monica.
Olá, sou Anderson Lopes Miranda, faço parte da coordenação do Movimento Nacional da População em Situação de Rua. É importante para nós alertarmos a questão do Covid. Todos os governantes falam, fique em casa, fique em casa, fique em casa. E quem não tem casa? Está em situação de rua, principalmente na segurança alimentar. É importante que tenha alimentação de qualidade, saudável para essa população. Que abra os restaurantes populares, que abra os restaurantes comunitários, que os poderes públicos atendam de fato essa população, que abra os hotéis para atender a população de rua, principalmente na pandemia, política habitacional, que parem com os despejos, que a gente possa se alimentar dignamente, que as sobras das feiras possam ser destinadas para a segurança alimentar, para a população em situação de rua. É importante esse trabalho, estamos juntos aí na luta, fazendo uma luta para que as pessoas em situação de rua possam se alimentar dignamente, comer dignamente, ter o café, o almoço e a janta dignamente, né? E nós estamos com muitas pessoas perdendo o seu emprego, indo para a situação de rua e passando fome, né? Nós estamos voltando à miserabilidade e à fome no nosso país, no Brasil. E é importante dizer que cada dia vem aumentando mais as pessoas em situação de rua. Então nós estamos pedindo aqui a FAO que olhe para nós, que atenda essa demanda do Movimento Nacional da População em Situação de Rua.
Olá, sou Mônica Buffon, uma jovem agricultora familiar e estou como secretária de Jovens da CONTAG, que é a Confederação Nacional dos Trabalhadores Rurais, Agricultores e Agricultoras Familiares. E este ano de 2020 tem sido extremamente difícil para a agricultura familiar, por causa da pandemia do Covid-19 e também por causa dos crimes ambientais cometidos na região. Sofremos com o fim ou o enfraquecimento de políticas públicas e sociais fundamentais para garantir o desenvolvimento rural sustentável. A principal consequência é o empobrecimento dos trabalhadores e das trabalhadoras rurais e a volta do Brasil ao mapa da fome, além do aumento do preço dos alimentos e a ameaça de desabastecimento. A pandemia provocou a suspensão das feiras livres e também das aulas, e com elas a venda da produção para a merenda escolar, o que provocou um aumento, uma queda drástica da renda de milhares de pessoas. E são desafios que afetam todos os países da América Latina. Os governos da região resistem em incluir os agricultores e as agricultoras familiares entre a população. Olá, sou Mônica Buffon, uma jovem agricultora familiar e estou como secretária de Jovens da CONTAG, que é a Confederação Nacional dos Trabalhadores Rurais, Agricultores e Agricultoras Familiares. E este ano de 2020 tem sido extremamente difícil para a agricultura familiar, por causa da pandemia do Covid-19 e também por causa dos crimes ambientais cometidos na região. Sofremos com o fim ou o enfraquecimento de políticas públicas e sociais fundamentais para garantir o desenvolvimento rural sustentável. A principal consequência é o empobrecimento dos trabalhadores e das trabalhadoras rurais e a volta do Brasil ao mapa da fome, além do aumento do preço dos alimentos e a ameaça de desabastecimento. A pandemia provocou a suspensão das feiras livres e também das aulas, e com elas a venda da produção para a merenda escolar, o que provocou um aumento, uma queda drástica da renda de milhares de pessoas. E são desafios que afetam todos os países da América Latina. Os governos da região resistem em incluir os agricultores e as agricultoras familiares entre a população beneficiada das medidas de combate à pandemia. E na América Latina, a CONTAG, as organizações da Coprofan e movimentos sociais parceiros estão atuando para garantir que as populações do campo, comunidades tradicionais e povos indígenas recebam os benefícios e dê resposta política eficaz às crises alimentar, econômica e ambiental. Para fortalecer a nossa luta na América Latina, também é importante que diretrizes e instrumentos de políticas globais, especialmente com o apoio do mecanismo da sociedade civil e do mecanismo de jovens do CSA, sejam implementadas com vista à reconstrução de políticas públicas de apoio à agricultura familiar, aos métodos agroecológicos de produção, à preservação do meio ambiente, à valorização da educação do campo e das condições para que os jovens rurais possam construir os seus projetos de vida.
Thank you for those. We have a very packed hour ahead of us, so we should move into our agenda here. We are going to listen to some key messages for radical transformation of food systems. And the youth will lead that, which is of course appropriate. They're forward going, and we'll have an intervention from on the women and gender and COVID-19 and food systems paper, as well as COVID-19 radical transformation of our food systems, the global synthesis report. And we also have the launch of our call to action on the Food Systems Summit, as well as comments from the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Michael Fakhri. Let me just note that we have to be timely here because Michael needs to leave at the latest at the end of the session at 17 o'clock. So let's move right into it. I'm going to introduce Tyler Short from the US Food Sovereignty Alliance to give us a piece on the youth demands. Tyler.
Thank you. Hello. Is Julia here with us also?
I am.
Great. Hi, I'm Tyler Short. I am a farmer and a farm worker in the United States. I participate in Family Farm Defenders and the youth articulation of La Via Campesina, North America. Julia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. I'm Julia Spania. I'm co-facilitator of the Youth Working Group. I am joining today from the Netherlands, and I am delighted to take part in a celebration with all of you today. Actually, it should be Nazmeen from Action Aid India and Bangladesh speaking today, but very unfortunately, she had an emergency and she cannot be with us right now. So I am standing in for her.
We have a PowerPoint presentation that will accompany this intervention. And we request that while I speak for the next 6 minutes or so, that we go to the next slide, please. So this is me on the left with sweet potatoes on the farm that I work at, and Nazmeen on the right with a group of women that she works with. The next slide, please. So we developed a youth declaration, which is going to be made available to everyone and posted on the website. The declaration comes out of a collective learning process. So we'll stay on this slide, please. The CSM Youth Working Group collectively analyzed the current moment in world history. We present this urgent message to the CFS and member states. Now is the time to transform. Now is the time for a just transition away from the extractive economy of capitalism. Our social movements and civil society organizations oppose corporate control over food and agricultural systems. From the essential base of society, we fight for people's food sovereignty. We defend democracy and our right to healthy, culturally appropriate food produced through socially just and ecologically sound methods. Small-scale food producers, frontline workers, and grassroots organizations should determine what and how we feed our communities. We call on the CFS to strongly advocate for immediate implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and Other People Working in Rural Areas, in addition to the voluntary guidelines on responsible governance of tenure of land, fisheries, and forests. During this UN decade of family farming, the CFS must promote food sovereignty and peasant agroecology as true solutions to the social and ecological crises that youth face. COVID-19 continues to shock global society and the world market. However, small-scale food producers and organized communities have proven during the pandemic that economies based on solidarity, cooperation, and ecology are highly adaptive and resilient. Localized, diversified, direct, and democratically controlled food systems are key to our survival as a species. Agribusiness exploits us, poisons our bodies, and pollutes our common sources of life. Agribusiness and neoliberal governments destroy ecosystems and local markets, favoring powerful transnational corporations. Capitalist agriculture robs the soil of nutrients and denies the worker and peasant the right to buen vivir. To build the new, a regenerative economy of life rooted in ancestral wisdom, member states must divest from the paradigm of industrial food production, which relies so heavily on extraction, militarism, and human rights violations in the constant pursuit of profit and capital accumulation. Support local markets and informal, non-market food distribution. Assist with the expansion of schools operated by social movements, such as La Via Campesina, for training young people in the politics and science of peasant agroecology. Enact genuine agrarian reform. Today, on Indigenous Peoples Day, we demand full implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and we honor Berta Isabel Cáceres Flores, a Lenca woman who co-founded and coordinated the Council of Popular and Indigenous Organizations of Honduras. She was murdered in her home over 4 years ago, likely as retribution for her role as a leader in organized struggle against a hydroelectric dam project on the Gualcarque River, a sacred river on which the Lenca people depend for subsistence. We also remember how, during the 44th plenary session of the CFS, the CSM Women's Working Group intervention identified the 3 main causes for women's subjugation and inequality. As Rasaid emphasized, patriarchy, feudalism, and neoliberalism are grabbing our lands, our waters, our seeds, forests, and natural resources, our territories, our bodies, and our rights. They ignore the ancestral knowledge of our Indigenous sisters, criminalize our struggles, and leave violence against women unpunished by opening the door to discrimination, conflict, crisis, occupation, displacement, and war. The rights of youth, women, Indigenous peoples, peasants, and workers, regardless of immigration status, must be fully realized in order to achieve the vision and mandate of the CFS. We respect diversity and demand inclusivity, especially for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, transsexual, queer, intersex, and all other people marginalized due to age, gender, race, ethnicity, class, caste, and ability. We demand equity-based policies that repair the harms of systemic oppression. Member states must uphold the right to food in order to ensure social peace and human dignity for all people. We denounce the shameful failure of multilateral institutions to stop endless wars, the ongoing weaponization of food, and the globalization of hunger and malnutrition. Though, as stated in 1967, by the Black civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the US government continues to be the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. The CFS should be deeply concerned about the assaults on democracy and obstructions of global governance institutions perpetrated by imperial powers, authoritarians, and far-right political movements. Fascism and ecological collapse are real, present dangers generated by the structural violence and contradictions of capitalism. We demand recognition as youth protagonists in history who are capable and already working to craft a better future. To strengthen the CFS, member states must support youth organizing in the CSM, a necessary space for us to engage in collective learning and debate. We urge the CFS to develop practices that guarantee the meaningful participation and leadership of youth representing indigenous communities and civil society. Thank you. Globalize the struggle. Globalize hope.
Thank you, Tyler, for presenting in such a beautiful and powerful way our vision as CSM Youth. We as youth have analyzed the world we live in, its multiple systemic pressures that go far beyond the acute pressures of COVID-19, and we have developed an alternative vision. As Tyler has just shared with you, we refuse to choose from the few options offered to us in the present. We continue to imagine alternative worlds, plural worlds, worlds that go far beyond business as usual, worlds in which our ways of doing the economy, of producing and consuming food, of caring for each other, of living with and as part of nature are radically different. We insist that these alternative worlds are possible. They are realizable. What we need to get there, and we will continue insisting this as well, is immediate, radical, systemic change. So to guide this process of transformation, we have in the past few months developed 10 demands for a radical transformation of our food systems. Of course, these demands can never be comprehensive, and we do not see them as a complete list. They build from the CSM Youth vision that we communicated to the CFS last year. You can find the report with our demands on the webpage of the CSM, and the translations of the report into Spanish and French, they will also be available there once they are finished in the course of this week. And all demands come with specific action points and recommendations on how to concretely fulfill them. Well, let me now, in the remaining few minutes, share our demands, which are directed to all member states and international institutions. So just for the slides, I will go through all the demands in the order that they are on the slides. First, we demand an end to food systems organized around capital accumulation, extraction, and subordination. We demand food systems to be organized around the principles of food sovereignty and the right to food. Second, we demand a transition to food systems that respect planetary boundaries and that prioritize our health, our future, the future of the planet, and future generations. Third, we demand an end to structural discrimination against indigenous peoples, Black people, people of color, women, migrants, rural people, disabled people, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, transsexual, queer, and intersex people, and the full realization of all people's rights. We demand living wages, and access to benefits for all workers, including status for migrant workers and rights-based social protection schemes that ensure an end to poverty, social exclusion, and structural violence. We demand a redistribution and reevaluation of the social, reproductive, and care work carried out predominantly by women due to the gender-assigned roles in our patriarchal society. We need to end patriarchy. We demand the realization of our right and our children's and communities' right to an education. We demand that this right be realized in a way that prioritizes our health. We demand our human rights to productive resources like land, water, seeds, biodiversity, and knowledge. We demand the protection and creation of territorial markets and solidarity economies. We demand comprehensive agrarian reform. We demand an end to anti-democratic governance processes, including those that silence our voices and co-opt our narratives, experiences, and visions for the future. We need seats at the table and opportunities to lead. We demand public policies that recognize our plural identities as youth, public policies that support youth-led agroecological initiatives. We demand that states and international institutions stop employing the narrative that youth are only interested in entrepreneurship and the newest technologies. We will not allow it to be reduced to this paradigm. Lastly, we demand a bigger role at the CFS, and that the CFS develop a set of rules of practice to ensure meaningful youth participation and engagement. Thank you very much.
Wow, this gives me so much hope. What a clear and powerful and thoughtful intervention from youth. Thank you, Julia and Tyler, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of response there, but on our agenda, we need to move on. I call now on my sister, Azra Saeed from the International Women's Alliance in Pakistan to present the Gender COVID-19 and Food Systems Report.
Thank you very much, Nati, and thank you very much, the youth, for giving such a powerful, clear message. I am so proud and I feel so much less burdened because we can see that our youth is not going to be, held, will not be sabotaged by the capitalists, by the greedy corporations who are out there to just gobble up everything that they can, our resources, our labor, our bodies, and our resources. It goes on endlessly. So thank you very much, both Tyler and my sister from Netherlands. It was a wonderful message, and to the entire youth constituency for working so hard to give us this hope. I also want to congratulate the CSM for its 10th anniversary, the building cohesion, the building solidarities of our movements across the peasants, to the indigenous, to the women, to the youth, to all of us, to the fisher folk. I don't mean to leave anybody out. I think each one of us counts. And I think the bigger we are, the more focused we are on breaking globalization, neoliberal policies, capitalism, feudalism, patriarchy, the closer we will be to an equal democratic society. And even if we have many hardships on our way, the goal is worth fighting for. The goal is even worth dying for. And so here, I think what my task has been to bring to you the key messages that the women's group has been working throughout the pandemic, to bring together the voices of the women from the grassroots, from every corner of the earth, to bring out not only the sorrows, the hardships of the people, of the women, but also to bring out their ever-present resilience, their ever-present strength to fight and overcome any adversary which comes their way. So to be very clear, the basic message that the women's constituency wants to convey through this report is that COVID-19 is a profound and unprecedented global crisis that is exacerbating and leveraging pre-existent systematic forms of patriarchal inequalities, oppressions, racism, colonization, neo-colonization, violence, and discrimination that cannot be tolerated. I think that was very clearly said by many people before I came here to deliver the women's message. The report also highlights that the COVID-19 pandemic has uncovered the structural vulnerabilities and weaknesses of our food system that are based on not only neoliberalism, but also on feudalism. It goes on to say that neoliberalism, global capitalism, and feudalism have been eroding for decades our social welfare and our welfare systems, fostering the structural colonial deprivation and land grabbing of natural resources of the global south. It has been violating our human rights. It has been harming our ecosystems and biodiversity and strengthening the sexual division of labor, leaving women to face alone the burden of production and reproductive social work. Given this context, the report summarizes research around the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on women in and across the constituencies of the civil society and indigenous peoples mechanism for relation with the UN CFS. The research that was carried out was basically designed through the consultation with the women's working group that is part of the women's constituency, and also the working group on global governance and the CSM Secretariat. I have been part of them on and off, and I know how much work that has been carried out. Our goal was to support the ability of the CSM to respond to the impacts of COVID-19 and to advance a people's policy agenda to address the current and the upcoming food crisis with an emphasis on women's rights and gender. Let me also thank Priscilla and Jessica, the two researchers who have really put a lot of effort in collecting the data, the stories, the solidarity messages, and have put together a cohesive report. To help us bring together the perspectives and voices of women on COVID-19, the Women's Working Group identified a list of 25 women active in the CSM, which were contacted, ensuring a representation across regions, constituency, and age. We were able to interview 16 of the 25 in the past few months. And a key learning that has been from this research is the collective spirit and emotional intensity generated during this time of crisis. And this spirit has been mobilized, and its impacts are going to grow, no doubt. I think that message has also come out very clearly from what the youth has just shared with us. Efforts dedicated to providing mutual aid offer a perspective of the crisis from below and provide us with concrete examples of rebuilding social fabrics based on concrete solidarity. Feminist and food sovereignty movements have been and continue to be central to these efforts to fight the pandemic. It was very clearly stated that protests and mobilizations, which are key to defining the future of social movements, were being severely backlashed under the lockdown by militaristic governments, very, very repressive, very, very autocratic, dictatorial governments have been active across the regions in Asia, in India, and the Philippines are really noteworthy. But no matter whatever draconian laws were imposed on people's protests, various forms of protest continued despite restrictions. And there was an example from the Philippines where the women danced to protest and managed to get the government to distribute aid. And then rather than sit out the crisis, social movements have adapted to the unexpected and emergent realities, focusing their energies around defending workers' rights, getting together mutual aid, solidarity, monitoring policymakers, and popular education. Let me also just add that women's kitchens were very, very active in ensuring, and to this day, they are very active in ensuring that the hungry get some amount of decent food, which our governments have failed to do. Around the globe, social movements have responded by creating strike funds to extend health benefits to people who have lost their jobs, and they have also organized to get food. Drawing from the interviews and documents, a 5-point principle was created. 5 principles were identified to guide policy and programs in relation to gender, COVID-19, and the food systems. These 5 were participation and representation. So these are the 5 principles that were determined by the women's group. These were participation and representation, human rights, of course, non-discrimination and intersectionality, food sovereignty, feminism, and then lastly, gender justice, equality, and equity. The principles were used to guide policy and programs and identified basically 4 areas where policy demands were articulated. These 4 areas are economic activities, access to resources and markets. Number 2, care work, public health, and gender-based violence. Then number 3 is participation, representation, and digital equity. And 4th, and the last one, is government response and social protection. For each of these 4 areas, there were a number of policy demands that have been articulated by the women's constituency, and I will try to go through them. I know that there is very little time, and there are other people who really need to speak, including Michael Fakhri, who also has to leave. So to be very brief and quick, under 1, economic activities, access to resources and markets, the most critical are to recognize the role of women and their organizations as economic and political actors. I think this is a consistent demand that women have been making across many years of patriarchal control, of capitalist control, of feudal control. The second is to acknowledge and protect women working in the informal economy. As we know that neoliberalism has thrown women, especially women in the southern countries, in the third world countries, into informal sector, and they work in extremely harsh sectors. And with the COVID-19, it has also laid bare the condition of the health workers even in the capitalist countries, the advanced industrialized countries, the migrant workers, the health workers, and also the food workers. Then we also made a demand of equal access and control on land. What we have said is ensure women have equal and non-discriminatory ownership rights to control land and other natural resources. Another critical area of demand has been to support women cooperatives and women-led small businesses. There is a very vital need to protect workers and to focus and reinvest in agriculture. And I would like to say in agroecology-based agriculture, not the capitalist agriculture, which has been denounced by the CSM over and over again. The second area is care work, public health, and gender-based violence. This is an area which is very critical to women. We have demanded to recognize, support, and redistribute unpaid care work. We have asked to ensure child care provisions and adopt family work conciliation measures, ensure access to information, ensure the right to health care, increase public education budgets, stop gender-based violence, and put an end to all forms of harassment. So this area is very critical to women because care work of the children, of the elderly, of the disabled, of everybody who's at home, the care work entirely comes to the women. And during the COVID-19, we were really stretched to our ends trying to look after everybody who was at home, which never through normal, what we call the normal, was not the norm. The third area was participation, representation, and digital equity. Our demands were recognize women and their organizations as key actors and decision makers of agriculture and rural development policies. This is a first step towards integrating a feminist perspective in decision-making and policy processes. Another demand was actively ensure the meaningful participation of women in rural and urban areas, invest and support women leaders and women organizations, fund gender-sensitive research, and finally, democratize internet access and conduct a mapping to identify digital inequalities. This was very true all through the pandemic. The women in the urban centers were being heard, but those in the rural areas had no connection at all, especially in countries like Pakistan and other third world countries where digital equity is really very patriarchal. First of all, it is very capitalist, and secondly, it is very patriarchal. Finally, government's response and social protection. Here we have said that ensure all COVID-19 responses are gender responsive. This encompasses each and every demand that is going to be made across the various reports that are coming out, including the Global Synthetic Report, and then prioritize social protection. Of course, that is also very, very critical. We have already said access and control over productive resources. The report concludes by reiterating the important work that movements, individuals, and other civil society organizations have undertaken, not only in solidarity with others, but also to hold our states accountable. Coming from Pakistan, I cannot tell you how hard it is to hold our states accountable. It's like giving up our right to live. It calls for a continuation of this momentum, recognizing that for all the negative outcomes, the pandemic and resulting crisis provides us with an important moment to push for equality, equity, food sovereignty, and for a feminist present and future that builds on knowledge from the past. I thank you all for giving us the time to share with you what the women's movement has been doing endlessly and through many exhausting days. And our sincerest thanks to everybody who has cooperated with us in putting together this report. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nettie.
Thank you, Azra, for that overview of this very important piece of work. You'll see, participants, that it's being shared. The link to both the Women's Report and the Youth Report are shared in the chat. So I urge you to go and delve into it and look through it. We have to move on in the agenda here. And I turn now to Andre Luzzi from the Habitat International Coalition in Brazil, as well as Kitana from Friends of the Earth India, UK, for the Global Synthesis Report, Voices from the Ground, from COVID-19 to Radical Transformation of Our Food Systems. Andre Kitana.
Gracias, Nete. Queremos saludar a todas, todos y todos que están en esta actividad de celebración. Soy Andrea Luce, miembro del Mecanismo de la Sociedad Civil y Pueblos Indígenas, habiendo participado en el grupo de tarea que contribuyó a la construcción colectiva de este informe. Y voy a compartir mi comunicación con Kirtana. El CSM se solidariza con todos aquellos cuyas vidas se han visto afectadas por las crisis de COVID-19. La gran cantidad de personas afectadas sigue siendo enorme varios meses después del inicio de la pandemia. Este informe es dinámico, ante grandes cambios mes a mes. Así, no es solo un insumo para la incidencia política, es antes un llamado a vida. Frente a la pandemia y las medidas de distanciamiento o aislamiento social, los miembros del Comité de Coordinación del mecanismo se reunieron virtualmente para discutir cómo la pandemia estaba afectando a sus comunidades y regiones. De estas discusiones surgió la convicción de que abordar la pandemia y sus implicaciones debería estar en el centro del discurso y acción no solo del mecanismo de la sociedad civil, sino en el Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria Mundial en su conjunto. Así, el mecanismo participó activamente en las discusiones sobre este tema en las reuniones de mesa directora y el grupo asesor del Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria. También estuvimos en eventos abiertos, actos públicos, como la sesión que abordó los impactos de la COVID en la seguridad alimentaria, así como la sesión acerca de los impactos en el sector de producción de alimentos, como el sector cárnico, haciendo contribuciones sobre los impactos en los trabajadores y las trabajadoras. El informe presenta las experiencias y preocupaciones de millones de pequeños productores de alimentos, trabajadoras, consumidores, mujeres y jóvenes, representados en movimientos y las organizaciones del mecanismo. La metodología adopta para su elaboración ha sido inclusiva y participativa, coherente con nuestras perspectivas de colectividad y colaboración. La FAO está prediciendo una crisis alimentaria inminente, pero para muchos ya es una realidad. La transformación de los sistemas alimentarios era imperativa, incluso antes de la pandemia de COVID-19. Con 1.000 millones de que enfrentan hambre, inseguridad alimentaria, aumento de las migraciones por angustia, aumento de la mala salud relacionada con la dieta, niños en todo el mundo, incluso en los países más ricos, a una comida escolar de la inseguridad alimentaria. Los trabajadores pagaban salarios de pobreza. Los países extremadamente dependientes de los mercados internacionales para alimentar a sus poblaciones. La continua destrucción de los ecosistemas por las cadenas alimentarias industriales. La violencia de género y la falta de acceso y control de los recursos naturales por las mujeres. La deforestación de la agricultura industrial, la minería y la infraestructura, la cría intensiva de animales y la explotación de especies silvestres ha creado una tormenta perfecta para el contagio de enfermedades de la vida silvestre a las personas. Décadas de políticas neoliberales que redujeron el papel del Estado y privilegiaron un sistema alimentario liderado por el mercado ha llevado al desmantelamiento de las políticas públicas y la regulación, priorizar las exportaciones de productos básicos, las ganancias de las corporaciones alimentarias y los mercados globales sobre los pequeños productores. Entre 83.000 a 88 millones de personas a más pasan hambre a causa de la pandemia. Los pueblos más afectados son los que carecen de protección social, tienen medios de vida inseguros y tienen un acceso y control reducido de los recursos. Estos incluyen las clases trabajadoras rurales y urbanas, productores a pequeña escala, pueblos sin tierra, pueblos indígenas, mujeres, pueblos que sufren de racismo y discriminación, personas sin hogar y privados de libertad e impresión, migrantes, refugiados, pueblos que viven en zonas de guerra y conflictos, y pueblos en países que sufren bloqueos económicos. Estos grupos sufren las desigualdades existentes, exacerbadas por el neoliberalismo, que aumentan su vulnerabilidad a COVID-19. Los impactos en todo el mundo han demostrado que las cadenas de suministro industriales globales, respaldadas por políticas neoliberales, dependen de la extracción y explotación de personas y del planeta. Ha provocado daños económicos, financieros, ambientales y sociales. Han profundizado el cambio climático y las desigualdades. Por el contrario, las respuestas de las comunidades han fomentado los valores de comunidad, solidaridad, resiliencia, sostenibilidad y dignidad humana. Nos hemos dado cuenta cada vez más de que al luchar contra el hambre y promover la seguridad alimentaria, estamos logrando el cambio día a día. Pero la evidencia muestra que debe ser más rápido. Los cambios necesitan ser más rápidos. Tenemos hambre de derechos, tenemos sed de justicia. Y nuestras evidencias han mostrado que es posible una respuesta global radical de transformación de sistemas alimentarios a vista del derecho humano a la alimentación. Y ahora mi compañera Kirtana pronunciará en las recomendaciones políticas que hemos presentado con base en la evidencia y experiencias comunitarias. Muchas gracias a todas las personas involucradas en este proceso colectivo. Muchas gracias al grupo de trabajo y la secretaria y comunicación. Gracias. Paso la palabra.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me. So I'm Kirtana Chandrasekharan, and I am from Friends of the Earth International. And I am indeed from India, but in the UK. So it all got a bit mixed up because it's, a bit of a confusion. But that's where I am. And I was also part of the CSM task group who was pulling together this report. And I'm just going to lead on from Andre's excellent presentation here and those of all the others, including the Women's Working Group and the amazing Youth Working Group, on what we found in this report, which also includes some of their contributions as well. And I think being in this event from the morning and here, what occurs to me is that this report coming together at this moment in time is really it's a demonstration of the unique contribution that the CSM makes to the CFS, and that the CFS space is in kind of bringing together strong global governance of food systems. And it's because this report, I think, brings together probably what is the most comprehensive evidence available so far on people's lived experience of the impacts of COVID-19, an authentic assessment of the policy measures that have been taken so far, also of all the diverse and myriad and innovative responses from communities at the grassroots level. But most importantly, it provides for us a really incisive analysis on the urgent responses that the CFS must take to address the COVID-19 crisis. And all of this is coming from the experience and the expertise of the peoples most affected, but who also have the capacity to take us out of this crisis. And these are, of course, the people who are represented in all the CSM constituencies. So without further ado, I'll talk a little bit about what are the kind of responses that we are looking for from the CFS. And there's some principles for it. The first thing that we ask for is that the CFS should lead the way in building understanding of how the COVID-19 crisis is not just a black swan event, but it's the expression of existing structural problems in our food system. And all the reports clearly show, as Andre has said, that the emergence and the devastating impacts of COVID-19 are closely linked to the economic, social, and environmental injustices of neoliberal policies. And the food system that's grown out of that, which is very much based on intensive agriculture, export-oriented production, market-led food provision, and corporate profit. So the COVID-19 crisis can't be fixed by emergency measures or stimulus packages, but that perpetuate the same model, but will require a deep reconsideration of the ecological, economic, and social conditions inherent in the current system, including its contribution to ecosystem destruction, hunger, social, economic, and gender injustice, and also a race to the bottom on workers' rights, and in general on the progressive realization of human rights in general, and particularly the right to food. So the first thing is that we really echo calls that have been made previously by several reports, including the Global Narrative 2020 report now by the high-level panel of experts for systemic change towards socially just food systems with agency, sustainability, and stability at its heart, which the CSM characterizes as a move towards agroecology and food sovereignty. The second thing that this requires as a response is a break from the neoliberal policy orientation. And this is very much leading from all the things that have been said so far, is that the industrial market-led food system is predatory in nature, and it cannot coexist with the systemic change needed. And I mean, there are several examples of this in our report, but just one of them is the whole case of animal factory farming during the COVID-19 crisis, which is a really telling example of the problems with the system, where all across the world, factory farms have faced huge outbreaks of COVID-19 due to low safety and welfare of workers, which are necessary in this system. At the same time, millions of animals have faced inhumane culling due to the volumes of scale and drive for economic efficiencies. But the further back along the supply chain, industrial meat companies and feed companies are increasingly being implicated in ecosystem destruction. And all the while, the industry is operating with these huge externalizations and extractive nature of people and planet. It is destroying actually sustainable small-scale livestock production. So despite several examples of this, what we see in our report is that all the evidence so far shows that official responses remain mired in the market-led paradigm, which is holding back progress. Most policies' responses to COVID-19 feature more support for global markets, big corporations, and pro-corporate new technologies and digitalization. So this is, of course, despite the fact that even the HLPE found that COVID-19 has caused serious disruptions to global food supply chains, while at the same time, local community-supported agriculture, fisheries, food cooperatives, social programs have all been hugely successful in terms of feeding, especially those that need it the most. The third response that we want to see is that all COVID-19 policy responses should be rooted in the progressive realization for human rights. So again, the evidence from all our reports show that very few official responses really centered human rights or indeed the need of the most marginalized peoples at any level. But in addition to that, the pandemic and the policy responses to it are intensifying ongoing human rights violations. So in the words of the UN Secretary General, the human rights are key in shaping the response. They focus the attention on who is suffering the most, why, and also what can be done about it. So what we would like to see, there's a number of measures in the report, but including things like more democratic oversight and control over some COVID-19 measures, parliamentary legislative processes to be continued, and especially to end the criminalization of and violence against community leaders and human rights defenders. And of course, there are several existing instruments, both within the CFS policy decisions, such as the voluntary guidelines on small-scale fisheries, on land and natural resources tenure, but several others, such as the UN DROP and UN DRIP, ILO core standards, where we can look to for where we root these kind of responses. The fourth one is in the response, we would expect it to be putting food sovereignty into practice, where the vision of food sovereignty, as we all know, asserts the right of all peoples, nations, and states to define their own food, agriculture, livestock, and fishery systems, and to develop policies on how food is produced, distributed, and consumed in order to provide everyone with affordable, nutritious, healthy, and culturally appropriate food. And this is something absolutely essential in the crisis, and it would mean, as a start, highlighting the essential role that territorial food systems and small-scale food producers, mostly women, play in feeding the majority, particularly those most affected in general by the food crisis and especially by the COVID-19 crisis. It means supporting agroecological production, social economies and protection, cooperative marketing, short circuits and supply chains, safe working environments, and adequate functioning of local food markets. And there are several other issues as well mentioned in the report. The fifth issue is that the response should reaffirm the primacy of the public sphere, meaning that states need to play a strong role to champion the public interests related to our food systems. The primacy of public policies over market and corporation-led responses is a precondition to support any kind of radical transformation of our food systems that's needed, where we see food not as a commodity, but as a human right, intrinsically linked to all human rights. So our report contains many, many, many examples of effective public policies and strategies for this just recovery from COVID towards a food system transformation at national and global levels. And I cannot go into all of them, but some examples would be policies to boost the productive capacity of smallholders for the coming season, reducing dependency overall on food imports, social protection for marginalized groups, policies for women's rights, but also at different levels, regulation to reduce social, economic, and power inequalities in food systems, to dismantle power concentration in supply chains. And overall, the fact that states must now reaffirm their sovereign regulatory role over markets and how they are functioning. And through all of these different responses, we think the CFS needs to play a really strong role to lead and strengthen global food governance as a response to the COVID-19 food crisis and all the other crises that are coming along with it. And what we can see is that global policy coherence and accountability will be key to the governance of our food systems. Past experience of previous food crises have already told us that we cannot address this in the absence of some kind of coordinated global policy response. And again, there are examples of why this needs to be the case, both in previous high-level panel of experts reports, but in CFS discussions, and now in our report, where several issues such as the ability of countries in the developing world to implement stimulus packages, the calls for debt cancellation, several things that really require a coordinated response, based on justice. And more than in any other international governance space, we believe the CFS is equipped to play a leading role in this, because it can count on the deep understanding of how food systems function, thanks to the high-level panel of experts, but also to the participation of us in the civil society mechanism, the various constituencies, and those who produce most of the food we consume. The CFS, of course, is also grounded in the human rights framework, and it's the only international forum which can ensure that all actors affected by the crisis can autonomously and legitimately construct a global response, but for which governments hold the primary responsibility to implement. So the heavy toll on COVID-19 that is taking on all our lives is still very shocking, but at the same time, we do have a unique opportunity now to change the course of our food systems, and we strongly believe the time to start is now. And this is really the key message from our report. And we end the report with a call for a paradigm shift that reclaims food systems as public commons for the well-being of people and planet, based on the centrality of human rights, that puts food sovereignty into practice, recognizes the primacy of public policies, and strengthens a genuinely inclusive, democratic, and coherent model of governance to realize the right to adequate food for all now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Kitana and Andre. We are running woefully short of time, and we're going to do a quick change of the agenda now, because the special rapporteur on the right to food needs to leave at 17 hours sharp. So I'll call on Michael Fakhri at this moment. Michael?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Nettie. And thank you, everybody. I apologize that I do have to leave in 15 minutes due to childcare duties. So it is 8 a.m. here in Oregon, and I've been up since around 4:30. So it'll be my turn to take over soon. And I've attended today from the beginning. I've read all the reports, and I'm just honored to be invited as a guest today. So just let me start with highlighting how the CSM has been such a welcoming space. It's a space of friendship and camaraderie, and that's been clear to me from the beginning of my mandate, and it's been clear today that this is such a space. And I've always felt welcomed as a guest to the CSM. And so with that, let me explain who I am, so you know from what perspective I'm speaking. And where I'm coming from. I'm from Lebanon, and in fact, this weekend was the anniversary of the uprising in Lebanon, in which there was a rare moment of hope, and people rose up to challenge our own government, which has been an oppressive government since independence. And that uprising was decimated by COVID. And what's happened in Lebanon, like many, many countries all over the world and in many communities around the world, people are faced with a brutal choice between being hurt or killed either by the virus or hunger. This is the choice facing people today. So the stakes are incredibly high, as everyone here knows. I'm also speaking from what is known as Oregon in the United States, otherwise known as Turtle Island. So I'm also a guest here in the land of the Kalapuya peoples. And so I want to express my solidarity with all indigenous peoples rather, in their struggle to strengthen and reclaim their relationship with their land and exercise their right to self-determination. What brought me into wanting to be the special rapporteur on the right to food is the long struggle of the CSM, but the longer struggle of the food sovereignty movement, and the anti-colonial movements that have been going on for decades. I come from a region where human rights is often used to justify military occupation, where human rights is often used to justify military intervention, or where human rights is cynically ignored by governments. So that's how I started my understanding of human rights. But I think the power of all the movements that we've heard from today, and the power of the CSM, is to reclaim the right to food specifically and make it one of the most powerful tools that has turned the CFS into a place not of cynical politics, but a place of pragmatism, hope, and potentially radical change. And I think the stakes are so high, are even higher today, as we heard from everyone, that I can't emphasize enough how important and powerful this solidarity is your work is what empowers the right to food. It changes it from an abstract principle into a powerful and effective tool. And it's what inspired me to take up this position. So what inspired me was not a theoretical commitment to human rights. What inspired me was not some professional ambition. What inspired me is the work you've all done over the decades, and to make the right to food very real in light of how acute the stakes are today. Let me then now turn to the discussion of the Food Systems Summit and share with you what I've been learning and my knowledge. I meet regularly with the task force, and I've been invited to be on the integrative committee. So what that means is right now within the Food Systems Summit, human rights is barely there. It's on the margins. And my job, I see it, is to push to infuse the human rights perspective throughout the entire summit. However, so that's a little bit of hope. Agroecology, however, is excluded at this stage of the Food Systems Summit. So I think there's even more work to be done to ensure that agroecology is not just included, but is a central feature discussed at the Food Systems Summit. And what I can say is that I will bring the demands from the CSM, from the different social movements, from the voices from fields, factories, and kitchens to the Food Systems Secretariat, and ask them to respond publicly and directly to these demands. What's also clear to me about the Food Systems Summit is, even though there's been they talk of a solution-oriented summit and a people's summit, there's no clear definition of what's the problem. And here, all the hard work of the CSM, all these new reports, which I received yesterday and I'll read closely, it's clear that the CSM and the CFS and the high-level panel of experts, that all this work that is done has identified what the problems are. So I don't think there's any question about what the problems are. I think all of this hard work and all of these reports coming from you, not from the Food Systems Summit, fills that void. I think it's now time, and there's all the instruments that have been created by the CFS, all the international law that is at the foundation of this, all the human rights that is at the foundation of this. It's clear that we have all the tools and all the authority and all the power necessary to solve the problem. And this is, again, due to the power of the CSM's work over the years. I will continue to promote the CFS as the ultimate space for solutions. This is because the CFS is a place that has not just the power of states, but it has the legitimacy which is provided by the CSM. Without the CSM, the CFS loses a profound amount of its authority and legitimacy. There's, and the way I'm watching and experiencing how the Food Systems Summit organizing is happening, and we've heard this from the youth representatives as well today, and what a powerful presentation by Tyler and Julia, truly inspiring me to continue this work. What's clear, what I'm seeing is how the way the Food Systems Summit is being developed and organized so far is not necessarily bringing people together. It's not built on principles of solidarity. I'm seeing it as, right now, it's dividing these abilities to working together. So I want to encourage all members of CSM to reach out to people who might be entering the Food Systems Summit that might be new to the Food Systems Summit. What I've noticed is a large number of climate change activists are coming through. Youth activists from the climate change movements are coming to the Food Systems Summit, and many of them are new to the politics of food and to food sovereignty. And I want to encourage everyone to reach out to these new colleagues and new comrades in the spirit of solidarity, and invite them and find ways to connect with them so that they understand that they're entering a stream, a long-standing river of power that has been flowing in terms of your struggles that have been going on for a long time. And that's going to be hard work, whether it's pushing against the Food Systems Summit, whether it's working within the Food Systems Summit. So I think I just want to encourage you to continue that solidarity work. And in my work, when I'm meeting different people, different activists, different diplomats, I'll continue to educate them on all the work that has come out of the CFS and the CSM. Just in my remaining time, I just want to point that I just want to echo what has been said also by Azra Saeed, representing and highlighting the women's report. COVID is clearly a crisis of care, and what we've seen from COVID are not new problems, but what we've seen is the violence that arises from social isolation. And also what we've seen is that solutions are only going to come from the people. They're going to come from the ground up. And so I put it to the CFS and all the members of the CFS to step up. The solutions are clear. They're coming from the ground. It's in front of us. It's now, and all the instruments are there. All the rules are there. And now's the time for action. And now's the time for listening to each other. And now's the time for solidarity. And I'll end just on a very practical point. Just to say that the CSM has been very inspiring to me, that the food sovereignty movement has been very inspiring. I just put out my first thematic report on international trade, and I put it in very practical terms, in very clear terms on how to change the trade system. But it's not just about the trade system. I think I provide a framework, again, building on your work, a framework on how to rethink the economic system. I mean, obviously, this is what we've heard time and time again today. What's at stake is transforming the economic system writ large, is building an economic system on notions of solidarity, on self-sufficiency, and on dignity. And the solidarity comes from social movements, self-sufficiency comes from feminist theories of care, and dignity comes from struggles, from human rights struggles all over the world. This report aligns with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, on the rights of peasants and other rural workers, on the land tenure guidelines, on agroecology. This is all just to say it is possible to create new, not just policies, but laws, and hold governments accountable and create change. I thank you, and I do apologize that I have to leave in 3 minutes again due to, I'm dominated by a 4-year-old, but thank you everyone. Congratulations on 10 more years, and here's to several decades ahead. Best of luck.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you for this thoughtful and critical analysis. And you have, in fact, bridged us to our next speaker, Saul Vicente, who is going to launch our open call for civil society and indigenous peoples engagement to respond to the UN Food Systems Summit. Saul.
Muchas gracias, querida Neti. Muchas gracias por las palabras del redactor especial sobre el derecho a la alimentación. Dedico en primer lugar estas palabras a mi hermano Isidro Pedraza, dirigente de nuestra organización en México, la Unidad de la Fuerza Indígena y Campesina, quien en estos momentos está hospitalizado por haber contraído la enfermedad del COVID-19. Les pido a todas y todos elevemos nuestras oraciones para su pronta recuperación. Muchas gracias. Hermanas y hermanos, el día de hoy en Abya, América, se cumplen 528 años del inicio de la invasión de los territorios ancestrales de nuestros pueblos. En esos años vivimos un proceso de colonización e imposición de un modelo económico de despojo de los territorios, recursos y bienes naturales. Sin embargo, el 12 de octubre también es la fecha en que se reconoce la lucha de resistencia de los pueblos indígenas de Abya por su dignidad, la defensa de sus culturas y sus territorios ancestrales. Actualmente estamos viviendo otra embestida de parte de quienes impusieron en el mundo un sistema de explotación de los recursos limitados con que cuenta el planeta, en su ambición por extraer la mayor cantidad de ganancias, poniendo en riesgo la vida misma de nuestra madre tierra. En estas circunstancias, los pueblos indígenas sufren las peores consecuencias. Crece la discriminación, el racismo. El modelo económico despoja a nuestros pueblos de sus territorios, recursos y bienes naturales, y se profundiza la crisis alimentaria en nuestras comunidades. Para hacer frente a esta situación, los pueblos indígenas iniciamos una larga lucha en el sistema de las Naciones Unidas para lograr el reconocimiento de nuestros derechos y seguir participando en aras de garantizar estos derechos en todos los espacios internacionales donde se necesitara, como es el caso de la lucha por el derecho a la alimentación. En esas condiciones, junto con el movimiento social internacional por la soberanía alimentaria, logramos la aprobación de la plataforma denominada ahora Mecanismo de la Sociedad Civil y Pueblos Indígenas, que hoy cumple 10 años de arduo trabajo en favor de la realización del derecho humano a una alimentación adecuada para todas y todos. Muchos han sido los logros alcanzados desde entonces a la fecha. Sin embargo, quienes impusieron el modelo de agricultura y de alimentación industriales en el mundo, el gran capital, sus grandes corporaciones y los gobiernos asociados a ellos, mantienen su objetivo de continuar por el mismo camino, a pesar del fracaso de dicho modelo, que ha generado una situación de inseguridad alimentaria, malnutrición y de pobreza para la mayoría de la población mundial. El número de personas hambrientas y desnutridas está aumentando en todo el mundo. Y a pesar de que cada vez se reconoce que los sistemas alimentarios industriales están fallando en muchos frentes, las empresas agroindustriales y alimentarias están tratando de mantener el control. Por lo anterior, ante la convocatoria lanzada por el secretario general de las Naciones Unidas a la realización de una cumbre de las Naciones Unidas sobre los sistemas alimentarios para abordar los desafíos que los sistemas alimentarios insostenibles plantean al clima y a la biodiversidad, manifestamos nuestras preocupaciones en una carta formal firmada conjuntamente por varios cientos de organizaciones, misma que a la fecha no ha tenido respuesta. Desde entonces, manifestamos nuestra preocupación de que ese proceso no corresponde a los mecanismos de política multilateral basada en los derechos, legítimo e inclusivo que sería requerido para justificar una cumbre, tal como se preparó para anteriores cumbres mundiales sobre la alimentación que dieron lugar a la creación de mecanismos de gobernanza innovadores, inclusivos y participativos con el objetivo de realizar el derecho a una alimentación adecuada para todas y todos. Entre otras decisiones, dio paso a la reforma del actual Comité
like to also talk about the reform of the CFS with a clear mandate to be able to ensure the progressive realization of the right to food. The UN summit really tries to be participative, but it's unclear who will be taking decisions and what kind of procedures will be taken. So this summit is structured and linked along the lines of agribusiness, the appropriation of resources and the capture of democratic processes. So it's clear that the corporate sector is in fact trying to organize this process. And we know that in fact public interest should prevail and there should be accountability in the process. This summit has been organized in a not particularly transparent fashion and did not consider participation sufficiently clearly. And I think it needs to be more inclusive along the lines of the CFS. So I would like to appeal to its president to ensure that there is more participation, that there's more participation from small-scale food producers and those that are most affected by hunger and malnutrition. It would be useful to be part of the group of champions, the agency, rather the advisory group, and in fact drafting groups, so that the process is more transparent. Indigenous peoples, workers, landless people, fisher folk, peasants, and people that spend their lives on family farms, people who are suffering from insecurity, consumers, youth and women from these sectors, we are all part of the CSM. And we want to launch an open call to participation from other movements so that they also participate. And we also want to denounce agribusiness and how it's trying to capture democratic spaces for their own private interests. We also look to unite our forces, and also we want to ensure that we have common strategies for this kind of issue to ensure the well-being of our people's health, nature, food sovereignty, and also justice for all. And I think it's more urgent than ever that we change our systems radically, as they are unhealthy, and we need to ensure that our food systems are based on a human rights approach and human rights as a condition of so I think that we need to be ensure that we organize ourselves based on our own process of autonomy and self-organization, independently from the summit, and create our own convergence spaces so that we can go more into our own analysis, our own responses, and to mobilize ourselves for our own solutions. Thank you very much. Before the crisis, with the crisis that's ahead of us, economic, health, and social crisis, we need to really take up the spirit of resistance of the indigenous peoples that have been has continued since 1492. We need to ensure human rights, and we need to demand our rights. We need to continue to use our spirituality and our identities to push our own strategies forward, like Buen Vivir, our traditional knowledge, living with the water, wood, protecting our seeds, natural medicine, the strengthening of our cultures, and also to create a system of governance that ensures light. Long live food security, because we need to ensure that we don't have slavery. We need to celebrate this day. Viva the CSM and viva Indigenous peoples. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Saul. I'm afraid we have run out of time here. I urge everyone to join the discussion, the side event that CSM is doing on the 15th in the afternoon. And I want to say an all-around thanks, first of all, to the interpreters whose time we've extended here. Thank you for your gracious patience with us. I also want to give a special thanks to all of the presenters. The discussion, the depth of knowledge, the expertise, the amount of information has been amazing. I also want to extend a thank you to the Secretariat, whose prodigious amount of work over these last 10 years and in again pulling together this event needs to be recognized. Civil society organizations rely on that kind of facilitation so that we can be effective, so thank you. And of course, most of all, thank you to all of the participants. I regret we can't have a Q&A, but as I say, we will have another discussion around COVID at our side event on Thursday afternoon. So thank you. I think if anything, if it was ever in doubt, this session has yet again demonstrated the depth of knowledge, of expertise, the determination of this struggle, and the vital importance for not only us, but all human society of the work we're doing. Thank you. That closes.